This is Marianne Martindale from the Alliance for a Better Utah, and welcome to the Better Utah Beat. Last week's special session of the Utah Legislature certainly was an interesting one, with everything from liquor licenses to public lands to the death penalty, of all things, on the table. Kathleen Clark, the governor's director of public lands policy, bent over backwards to adopt the same unconstitutional stance on United States-owned land as the more extreme members of the legislature. She and Representative Ken Ivory gave a joint presentation to several of the interim committees on how the land grab initiative is progressing. As we mentioned several weeks ago, the conservative lawmakers pushing this initiative are under fire across the state, with over 60% of Utah citizens now opposed to the idea of using millions of their taxpayer dollars to pay for a lawsuit against the United States, which every constitutional attorney has said will ultimately fail. The new talking point for the lawmakers is that they are trying to achieve their takeover of citizen-owned land through political means, by forming a coalition with other Western legislatures. Unfortunately for them, this new tactic has not started well, with their key ally, Arizona Governor Brewer, who is not exactly known for shying away from controversy, vetoing the plan. Director Clark and Representative Ivory, who sponsored the legislation, faced some heavy questioning during their presentation, after neither one was able to provide an answer for how Utah would replace the nearly $300 million we receive every year to take care of these lands, or the $1.7 billion in annual tourism revenue Utah enjoys, which would certainly diminish if the legislature succeeded in selling off public lands to private corporations. Representative Ivory's claim that selling off these lands is the only way to fund public education in Utah also broke down quickly, as Senator Karen Morgan pointed out that Utah has nearly 3 times the amount of private land as the state of Massachusetts. Yet, Massachusetts has one of the most well-funded education systems in the nation, while Utah, once again, is dead last in per-pupil funding. Meanwhile, the Law Enforcement Interim Committee had a rather unexpected issue: the death penalty. Representative Steve Handy asked the committee to recommend that the legislature conduct an in-depth study on the issue of the death penalty. The proposal saw both supporters and opponents among his fellow lawmakers, but Handy made some excellent points for a repeal of Utah's execution law, such as the lack of evidence that the practice is in any way a deterrent to crime and is actually more expensive than a life in prison sentence. It's certainly controversial and an emotional subject, but we at Better Utah believe it's a conversation that is long overdue. Lastly, the special session's alcohol debate showed the hypocrisy of at least 11 lawmakers when faced with the economic necessity for more liquor licenses. Almost without exception, every Republican legislator on the Hill preaches of the perfect results when the free market and individual choice are allowed to reign supreme. Yet that principle was immediately cast aside by several legislators as soon as the topic of liquor licenses was raised. It's well known that numerous local restaurants and several national chains have been unable to open locations in our state due to the legislature's refusal to grant enough liquor licenses to meet the demand of the market. This limitation has caused hundreds of millions in lost revenue and taxes, not to mention hundreds of potential jobs. Free market principles would say that if the market is demanding growth in the hospitality sector, you must accommodate in order to watch the economy grow. Yet for Senator Margaret Dayton and Representatives Barris, Dougal, Draxler, Eliason, Frank, Herod, Menlove, Nielsen, Sagers, and Sumption, their personal feelings toward alcohol overrode their promises to their constituents to uphold freedom of choice and the free market. Representatives LeVar Christensen and Representative Draxler actually went as far as to suggest that free market principles should not be considered, and that, quote, so-called economic development is secondary, end quote. We understand that for these lawmakers and for many of the citizens of Utah, alcohol isn't something they themselves use. But you see, that's the thing about the free market principle. It isn't based on foisting your own personal decisions on others, especially at the expense of economic growth, which is so desperately needed in Utah right now. Many of those representatives are up for re-election this year, and we can only hope that their constituents will demand to know why they just broke so easily from their promise to hold personal choice and free market principles paramount above all else. Don't forget, today is primary election day. Be sure to vote. There's still a few hours before the polls close. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or unaffiliated, this is our opportunity as citizens of Utah to be heard. Until next week, this is Marianne Martindale from the Alliance for a Better Utah with this week's edition of The Better Utah Beat. Have a great week, and remember that together we can make a better Utah.
For more information about the Alliance for a Better Utah's current projects, please visit betterutah.org and kickalec.out.org.